Oh, yeah, we are live. If you're watching live with Eric Segall, and it is Labor Day, and you didn't know we were going live. I surprised you, and you said even on Labor Day, but yeah, here I work all the time, off and on. Good to see you. Thank you for joining me on Labor Day. What were you doing?
Happy Labor Day, one and all. This morning, Lynn and I had two friends over for brunch. We are now living in a renovated house, done with lots of labor. I'm going to say the word labor a lot today, just to be obnoxious as hell. Is that okay? And and it was a lovely brunch. Lynn makes this thing that might be the unhealthiest food ever anywhere. We start with bacon, which by itself is unhealthy. And then she adds tremendous amounts of brown sugar. And you have to eat like 7 slices. No human being can resist.
Can't eat bacon.
No, I love bacon. And well, no, my point is it's so good that you eat tremendous amounts.
I said candied. Like it's like candy bacon. It's sweet.
Yes. Sorry, yes. It's sweet, candied, amazing, orgasmic bacon.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
It's a weird thing to do when you're with friends, but fine. And
they loved it very much.
I like very much. It's not unhealthier than your normal breakfast, which is children's like Fruity Pebbles cereals and so on.
I actually want to mention these friends because I didn't know until today. So they are a gay couple. They're about 8 years apart in age. Lynn and I are 10 years apart in age. And about a decade ago, maybe more, they moved from Atlanta, where they were living, to Covington, Georgia, which is about 40 minutes away. But that 40 minutes, Pete, is worlds away.
Culturally.
And they were the first gay couple living openly in that part of Georgia. And at first, it was hard. One of the parents said, "What should I tell my kids?" This is only like 10, 15 years ago. But they're lovely people. They've turned the whole town around. And it's like you always said, Pete, when we first started talking about same-sex marriage in 2008 or 9, 17 years ago, whenever it was, you said that gay rights were going to improve quickly because everybody knows gay people. And eventually, the more they come out, you realize they're just people, of course. And these two people have kind of turned around this small little town. It's a great story.
Oh, that is wonderful. I mean, it's just kind of true that when you often get to know someone really well at work or even in your neighborhood, and then you like them, and then you find out they're gay, and you can't stop liking them. I mean, you can, people do, it happens. But that was my life story. In that, my uncle, my mom's brother, older brother, was always my uncle, and then he became my gay uncle. Like when I was 14, my cousin said, "Do you know Uncle Jim's gay?" And I go, "What? Oh, I didn't know that. Is that why he isn't married or something like that?" And she's like, "Yeah." And then that was it. That was it. You can't stop liking someone that you already love or like a lot when you find that out. And if you do, that's your problem. Now, did your gay friends that came over today, do they force it down your throat? Their sexuality?
Not in any way, shape, or form. I don't even know what that sentence means so much.
It's the most common phrase you hear uttered by the kind of anti-gay people, which, by the way, they're always trying to sound open-minded. You've never heard this? It's like, I have no problem with gay people. I just don't like them forcing it down my throat.
Well, I'm kind of hoping, I know this is naive, that to some degree that's the thing of the past, but obviously it's not. I know it's not. But I don't know. I don't know how you can meet these two people and not find them wonderful and great. And no, they don't do that at all. And they didn't do that in their town. They just lived ordinary lives, raising their daughter in an ordinary way and living the life everybody else was living in that town. And eventually, because of their kindness and because they're great people, it's exactly what you always said. People were like, "Oh, now I get it. What's the big deal?"
Yeah, I wonder, though, if that remains true given the fact that the hoods are off.
Well, it's getting much worse with this administration, of course.
And the trans issue is fairly new for people, and they connect that with the gay issue with gay people. I shouldn't say issue, but trans, and it's hard for a lot of, as I'm sure you know, people who identify as lesbian or gay being necessarily connected to trans, because it's not your sexual orientation, it's your gender identity. But what I'm trying to say is, gay and lesbian people who have gained a lot of freedom and access and comfort are now being also, there's so much hatred for trans people, as you know, and it's just like, it's all they lump them all together. So
well, we're in the age of everybody who we have a presidential administration and a Republican Party that at least publicly says everybody who's different is bad, and everybody who's not white male Christian is bad. That's basically the message.
Yeah.
And it's just terribly sad.
I'm going to ask you a follow-up on that, but just quickly on gay marriage. I mean, Hillary Clinton notably came out and said she thinks the Supreme Court will overturn Obergefell, which is the decision that created marriage equality as law of the land. And now we get to learn that lady's name, Kim Davis. Is that her name? The Kentucky town clerk. So I forget what your analysis and prediction was of this and whether or not it comes up in this upcoming term.
So before I give you my prediction, as a practical matter, let's assume for a minute there are 5 votes to overturn it. Let's just say that for a minute. What would be the practical results of that? Well, they're not going to take marriages away from people.
Like already married people won't lose their marriage.
I don't think so. I mean, that seems like something that can't happen. So they would leave it back to they'd put it back to the states. And then in Georgia, for example, probably there would be some gay people who were married and some gay people who were not allowed to be married. My youngest daughter, Kai, is walking in with a friend. She doesn't know I'm doing a podcast. All hell may break loose in 2 minutes. I don't know. But we'll find out. It'll be fun. It's Labor Day. So I think pragmatically, they have a very hard time figuring that out. 3 years ago, during the first Trump administration, I was very sure it would not be overturned. I still think it will not be overturned, but I am not sure anymore. I've lost confidence in that. And I don't know, Pete. I'm a little worried about it.
It's an interesting, but it is a really interesting point in that with abortion, they went back to the states, but marriage is not healthcare, as I'm referring to abortion. So it's,
right. I mean, it's hard to imagine what they say to those states who want to ban same-sex marriage. Also, then the federal government and states would have different rules. And that's really a problem. That was a problem for the 2 years where they struck down DOMA but didn't decide the state issue. That gets really complicated for state. Tax returns for gay people in those 2-3 years were incredibly complicated because they were married at the federal level, but not. So I'd like to think I'd like to think Kavanaugh and at least one other would not go for this. Gorsuch. Gorsuch wrote Bostock. That's kind of a good sign.
And what did Bostock say?
Bostock said that the federal employment discrimination law applied to both LGBTQ and trans people. I mean, that case was 5-4, could have gone in a different way. Gorsuch kind of saved the day in that one. Or maybe it was 6-3. I apologize. I think Roberts may have joined him. So they did interpret Title VII in a very gay rights friendly way, led by Gorsuch. Gorsuch, it seems to be only anti-LGBTQ when it comes up against religion. Then he's always for religion, and he always will be. But but then again, Pete. So what I was going to say was, I would actually be 98% sure that they weren't going to overturn it. Except I told you this before. Every law professor in America, I think, including the most conservative pro-Trump law professors, of which there are about 6, but every even conservative law professor got the Trump immunity case wrong. We all got it wrong.
Right.
None of us thought they would do what they did. So it's hard to predict anymore.
It's been hard to predict, but you've been as good as anybody. I wanted to ask you a couple more quick things just to get your reaction to. We haven't talked in a bit on the record. And then I want to get into one of your upcoming pieces about the Roberts courts, the highs and the lows, or mostly lows.
Just lows, no highs.
You posted this, I think on Blue Sky, this picture that's become infamous pretty quick of a banner in front of the Department of maybe Labor, one of the major agencies in Washington, D.C. And I'm not sure how many others it's hanging in, but there's a huge poster the size of the building of Trump's face. And it's so dictator on the nose, like movies about dictators, old film clips about dictators, North Korea style, Saddam style. We've seen this everywhere else. To me, like it's just so it's so overt. And I sat for a minute and I thought, I wonder what MAGA folks think. And I wonder what right winger or anybody who supports Trump thinks about that. And I thought, where I I ended my normal conclusion like they're probably fine with it because A, it bothers us and that makes them happy, and B, they're happy he's in charge. It's a cult. He's their leader. But I just want, like, I can't stop thinking about a huge banner of the president's face hanging in front of a federal building in Washington, D.C. I think about it a lot in simply that. Doesn't everybody see that and think that that's a bad sign for a country?
It's interesting. My oldest friend from high school, who's not a lawyer but very much into politics, he lives in D.C. It really bothered him. Like it really bothered him. And my friend is an epidemiologist, so these days everything is bothering him. He does vaccines. The first time that happened, he put it up on a building next to a huge thing of Abraham Lincoln, and now he took that down, and now he's done it again. I think. I have several things to say about this. The first one is when he put it next to Lincoln. That's where it was before the first time.
First time. I'm sorry. You mean Trump too, though, not in the first term.
No, yeah, I mean Trump too. My understanding is there was a huge picture of him on a building in D.C. next to a huge picture of Lincoln.
Right. I think that's right.
And now he's done it again, I think, at the Department of Labor. Doesn't matter. Here's my point. I think he thinks himself as Lincoln. And the reason that is so scary and terrifying is because Lincoln famously and justifiably suspended the writ of habeas corpus in the Civil War and declared martial law because we were in fact at war, at a war. And I think Trump thinks of himself that way. And I know Trump wants to declare martial law. So that part of that story scares me away. What's more terrifying than the poster is the cabinet meeting he just had that he did publicly. And people went around the room for like an hour and a half, I think it was, his cabinet, just saying, you're the best, you're the greatest, you're the number one.
I couldn't bring myself to watch that. I
heard watched like 20 minutes of it. But here's the point of it. What it really means is, unlike his first term, and we know this already, but to see it play out in real life, no one in his orbit ever says no to him or ever questions him.
Right.
And that's terrifying for any leader. That'd be terrifying for Obama, for Biden, for I don't care who. That's it. Presidents usually surround themselves with people who will at times say no to them. Don't do that, Mr. President. Our presidents have done that. Even our worst presidents have done that. Trump has not. And it's all of one piece. He thinks he can run this like a CEO. He thinks he's a king. He has no board of directors. And that's how he's running. That's how the government is being run, except that he's deferring to Steve Miller a lot. And that's even worse.
The thing that I thought was most scary, is his comments about being a dictator. I'm not a dictator, but a lot of people would be okay if I was. I'm paraphrasing. And maybe I haven't stopped thinking about that for a while because I think he's right. I think that a lot of Americans don't understand, care, or want democracy. And I think too many of us give most Americans credit for thinking they understand what a democracy is. You don't know that. It's like a fish doesn't know it's in water. And so when it gets taken away, and so that's happening now, and people don't see it, but specifically, this is my theory that I've been thinking, this old diatribe, and you just mentioned it, kind of conservatives always thought and think often that government should be run like a business. And they make arguments about better economics, competitive edges, efficiencies, and so on. But if you take that a little further, I've been thinking about that a lot because I used to hear that all the time. It's like a business doesn't have to answer to anybody. A business, you could be on, if it's a big business, public, the board of education or the board of directors and the shareholders or something. But like a lot of businesses, it's just the boss. It's my restaurant. You do what I say. And that is more efficient and it works really good for that restaurant. But when you do it as a country, all I'm saying is those people like it because things happen fast. He's just doing everything himself. No Congress, no courts. It's just him making decisions. And he's making the point. People are okay with it. And the last point about it, I want to say is I think Republicans and conservatives are completely fine with having the military and cops patrolling their streets. They have no problem with it. They're not scared of them. They think it's great. So that's reactions to that.
Well, So James Madison said, I'm paraphrasing, it's a famous quote, the accumulation of all powers in one person, whether kingly, hereditary, or elected, is a tremendous threat to liberty and to the separation of powers. Because so the founding fathers were white, slave owning males. It doesn't mean they didn't have some good ideas also. And they had two good ideas. They more than that, but they had two very good ideas. One came from Montesquieu, and that was separation of powers. You avoid tyranny by diffusing power.
Mm.
And that's why we have a president, a Congress, and a Supreme Court. So you do it horizontally, and you also do it vertically. States have to retain. By the way, conservatives have been yelling since I've been in the legal world. So that's 1980. Since I was in 1980, I went to law school and I heard this. Conservatives always believed that it was really important for states to retain a lot of power vis-a-vis the federal government as a counterpoise to tyranny, as a way to stop, losing liberty. And I don't know where that went. And there are still some conservatives
I know
who feel
where it went.
where to go.
I mean, seriously, I think it's a convenient argument to make when you think that the tyranny might come from a person, entity, or ideology that you don't agree. But now that they have all the power, not all conservatives, not the principled ones, but a lot of conservatives are completely fine with the tyranny. And I beg the question, why were the crafters, why were the founding fathers, those who, and other theorists, against tyranny? Because tyranny is good if the tyrannical leader is one of yours.
So, well, okay, maybe. I think it's complicated. I think that's a piece of the puzzle. I think there are other pieces of the puzzle.
Like if you were in charge, if Segall was in charge, full dictator, I would love it because I agree with you on almost everything.
So the Republicans had the presidency from 1980 to 2002, 12 years. They appointed judges for 12 years. They had a lot of power for 12 years. But 98%, if not 100%, of the Federalist Society, Ed Meese, Ronald Reagan, first George Bush, the Department of Justice. I worked for the first George Bush during that time in that administration. Those people, all of whom were trained, most of whom were lawyers and law professors, they sincerely believed that even though they had the power, states' rights was still something, at least pay lip service to. And there are some issues they don't believe it on, like affirmative action and guns. But overall, there was an intellectual. Steve, Pete, the Federalist Society, Madison's quote is one thing they used to use all the time. We are in a post-Federalist Society Republican Party where lawyers don't rule and true believe cult people do. And boy, this really surprised me because I always thought we have way too many lawyers, way too much law. It'd be much better without all the lawyering law things going around. But it turns out, I think, we're going to find out that actually the rule of law, as opposed to the rule of people, is a really important concept. In the first constitutional Supreme Court case ever decided, Marbury versus Madison, Chief Justice Marshall made a mess out of a lot of things, and it's a case that has a lot of problems. But one part of that was when someone in America suffers a legal injury, should they get a legal remedy? And his answer, and this is 1803. In England, your only remedy was the king. The king gave it to you, got. In 1803, America, Chief Justice John Marshall wrote, "We are a rule of law, not men." Should be people, of course, but he wrote a rule of law, not men. And it's a great paragraph about the importance of the law binding people, not the other way around. Now, we've never been a rule of law, not men. Of course, that's an ideal, not a reality. But even in the middle, I was there for the end of the Reagan administration. Even those people did believe in that concept. These people, Steve Miller does not. Pam Biondi does not believe in that concept. And so what I'm about to say is my original contribution to all this, because other people are saying what I'm saying. We have not yet faced the fact that we are living in a post-Federalist Society Republican Party, which somehow is much worse than the Federalist Society Republican Party, which is really hard to believe. So one last thing about this. Justice Anthony Kennedy, without whom we wouldn't have same-sex marriage. Justice O'Connor, who kept Roe alive for many, many years, kept affirmative action alive for many, many years. And my friend, Judge Posner, who in his last few years was very moderate to liberal on issues of abortion, affirmative action, and gay rights, they all predated the Federalist Society, which is why they did those things. Then we get this era of Republican administrations being staffed by the Federalist Society. Those people are out of power. One of those Federalist Society lawyers, a friend of mine named Ilya Soman, who's been on your show a couple of times. Ilya is a libertarian. We would disagree on almost everything, but he's fighting Trump tooth and nail in court. He helped write the briefs in the big tariffs case that Trump just lost. So he's a Federalist Society member who is fighting the Trump administration every step of the way like a fucking hero. You should have him on your show. He's great. I need to recognize, what my conservative colleagues need to recognize, is we're not living in a Federalist Society Republican Party, and this is much worse. And that's a terrible thing, and that's a really depressing thing to say, because that was a terrible thing. But this is worse.
It's. I mean, just a shorter version of a lot of what you just said, and what I was trying to say is, Trump supporters, MAGA Nation, does not like checks and balances when their dear leader is in charge. Of course, but everybody should always like checks and balances, no matter who's in charge. But they're not worried about it as long as he's in charge. As a matter of fact, you could argue they even like policies they didn't used to like because he likes them. I mean, I've done that with some of my friends and family. I sometimes change my mind because somebody else likes it, but not on important life affecting laws. So, I mean, they don't believe in checks and balances as long as their daddy is the one in charge.
So, Pete, I'm going to say something real personal that I don't think I've ever said on your show. Ever. I don't think so. I don't. But I do want to say it because it's so relevant to this conversation. Your audience probably has seen or been to a TJ Maxx, a Hit or Miss, or a Marshalls, right? Those are three stores that a lot of Americans shop.
Hit or Miss might no longer be a thing, but go ahead.
Let's take TJ Maxx and Marshalls.
Yeah,
those are
go
two
ahead.
Huge stores.
Yeah.
So those three companies, well, TJ Maxx and Hit or Miss started off as subsidiaries of another company called Zare Department Stores. Zare Department Stores was the Target of the 1970s. My dad was the CEO of that. So my dad was at one point the CEO of what is now TJ Maxx and Marshalls. And he was CEO for close to 10 years. And that was a big job. And my dad made it so clear to me as I was like watching him do this, and to his people, that he wanted to be told when he was wrong. He wanted to be told when he was in. He also started BJ's Wholesale Club too. He wanted people around him who would make him the best he could be. That's part one of the story. And part two is he knew it was time to leave when he felt like he had heard it all before. Where conversations from 8 years ago, 20, he was in business much longer than he was that, where he stopped listening the way a good CEO listens. Even if we conceded, which I'm not and you're not in any way, that America should be run like a business, which we shouldn't concede. But even if we did, the most successful businesses, I knew the CEO of American Airlines, I knew a bunch of them. They ran their companies not like Donald Trump is running America. They ran their companies by huge delegations of power, for one thing. And two, although they made it clear the final decision is ours, I want people around me who will keep me honest and keep me straight and make sure I'm not doing something, and he is so unwilling to do that, that it makes everything 10 times worse. We have a terrible businessman running the country as a business, not a good businessman. Yeah. And that's just, and by the way, as a tenured law professor of 34 years, I told my class 2 weeks ago, my first class this semester, I said, this is the problem with Supreme Court judges. They feel like they've heard it all before. They were around forever. They, all that stuff. And I said, frankly, I shouldn't have tenure. I should have to prove my worth every couple of years, at least, because I work for the government. I don't care what private companies, I don't care what Emory University does, a private university. But Georgia State's a public school paid by taxpayers. It's insane that I have a lifetime job. Now, the rationale back is for doctors and lawyers and business schools, I could make 10 times my salary in the private sector. And so could Lynn, for example,
teaching at Emory edge, and she works.
So maybe that's a rationale, maybe, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, having people to tell you that you're wrong isn't necessarily. You could argue it's in your self-interest for the longevity of, in this case, your company or your career. Like that's
my dad thought that. Yeah, my dad insisted on it. He wouldn't hire someone at the top levels who wouldn't say, Morris, listen. Do you hear my reasons for saying you shouldn't be doing this?
Dad's name was Morris.
My dad's name was Morris.
Was that hard for him?
And actually, now that we're talking about this, behind me is a poster of American Express, since we're talking about this, where he was before he went to this company. He ran the credit card division.
Well, it looks like it says Maurice on that.
So he's a French. He was born in Canada and he was French Canadian. He was Maurice until he came to America when I was 4 years old, and then he became Morris.
Wow.
Yeah, and one of the fun things about all this, since we're talking about it, and it's Labor Day, is and the reason I'm a spoiled brat is because in the 1970s, early 70s, it just so happened that the Mets won the championship in '69 and 73. The Knicks won the 2 championships during that time. The Rangers were good. The Jets won the Super Bowl, and all of those years I was getting first row seats to sporting events. That's why I'm a spoiled brat. But that picture behind me is full of celebrities. People old enough will remember. Don't Leave Home Without It with Jack Nicklaus. Don't Leave Home Without It. And that was my dad's thing. And it was interesting. I bring this up for a reason. So he met a lot of really famous people. And he would tell me about them. And some of them were humble, modest. And they all had incredible work ethics, of course, because you don't get, but some were humble and modest, and some were not. I think if you're going to run a big company, a country, a law school, whatever, you have to be humble and modest enough to listen to other people. And we don't have that in our government at all. I mean, I don't know President Obama. I have no idea what he's like in person. I don't know anything. But the people who knew him at Harvard Law School, and my sense is he wanted people to stand up to him when necessary.
That's not your sense. I mean, what's her name? Of course, Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote that book, I think, about a team of rivals about Lincoln, and Obama based his administration on that, and he certainly did have that. I mean, people know that just based on the Bin Laden raid decision, much less healthcare. He'd have his chief of staff pitted against his vice president, Biden versus Rahm Emanuel, and so on. So,
when I started my Supreme Myths podcast, which ran 126 episodes and might be coming back, when I ran that, my whole idea when I started it was have conservatives on, so they and I could fight civilly and with humor.
Of course.
And people thought that was for the audience. It wasn't. It was during COVID. I was bored, but I wanted to learn stuff. And if I have a liberal law professor on who feels the same way I do about everything, what am I going to learn from that? And that's the whole theme of your show when you first started. It was. And maybe, it's just, I don't understand the idea of not wanting to learn. And Donald Trump has never wanted to learn, not when he was 12, 15, 20, 30, 40.
I've tried, by the way. Things are so different on the podcast, obviously, than they were at SiriusXM. But now I feel like I don't invite MAGA, Trump supporters on, because they're not, I don't believe they're arguing in good faith, or I just don't want to platform a lot of the nonsense that they say. I kind of have a threshold. If you can only come on the show if you think Joe Biden won in 2020 and vaccines are safe and effective and climate change is real. And then everything else, I don't care what you think about tariffs or economics. And
Pete, when you were on SiriusXM, we had conservative law professors on all the time. Remember?
I mean, and by the way, I would still have these people on, but most of the time my audience hates when I argue with someone like that, because it seems senseless. Let me ask you.
It's a different world right now. I think we're in a world that hopefully is going to change, but it's a different world.
A federal appeals court has ruled against Trump's tariffs.
Yeah.
It seems like a pretty significant ruling. There's some other ones out there that have happened. I just wondered if you want to interpret that for us or anything else that's happened.
So my friend, I was just saying, Elias Salmon was a big part of that lawsuit.
Yeah.
I think it's all for naught because I think the Supreme Court is going to rule for Trump 98% of the time. And at least until the American people really rise up. If the American people really rise up, then the Supreme Court will back down. But if that doesn't happen, and they have so far, they have ruled for Trump almost every time. Now, there were 2 cases last term where they ruled against him in executive power cases, but they were really small. I'm not saying they weren't important, Pete, but they were a pebble in a river of stones. I mean, it wasn't. So I don't know. I have not studied the tariff issues from a constitutional law legal perspective. What I can tell you is, if this were a Democrat president doing this, the entire Federalist Society, the entire Republican Party, every conservative in America would be insane. They'd be like, the president can't do this on his own. I mean, if Congress wants to do it, they have the right. But the president can't do this. I mean, that would just be unanimous. They would be as loud as anything. So I don't know.
Because not only can the president not do this on his own, this is such an anti-conservative mood, the tariffs. It's very much not something that conservative economists, economic scholars have ever supported. There's a famous Ronald Reagan speech about why tariffs are bad, and companies that are multinational companies, it's a globalized world. We get things from all over the world. Tariffs are, even if they were ever good, certainly aren't as much when you need to fucking order a part from China or Japan or wherever the hell it's coming from. And so the idea that they won't argue against it, it's
crazy. It doesn't make and it's insane. And I also don't really. So while that's going on the one hand, and it's terrible, and it's going to really hurt our economy from what people say. I'm not an expert, but I do have this friend from high school who is an absolute expert on epidemiology and was part of the meningitis vaccine, and he's really, really important in the vaccine world. I am much more worried about our health, Pete. I mean, I think, how we, the person who's worst on health of anyone in this country.
It's an interesting point for you to make, because I pay attention to a lot of these issues, some more than others. You obviously pay disproportionate amount of attention to legal issues, con law issues, but whatever we interpret as really bad con law or Supreme Court decisions and what they mean, many of them do have an effect on our health, obviously reproductive rights, and I would argue pollution and other things.
Medicaid in 2012 was a big deal. Overturning the Medicaid part of Obamacare was a big deal.
So, but even then you're talking about whether or not my healthcare is going to be paid for. And that matters a lot, but I feel like what you're talking about, certainly what your epidemiologist friend is talking about, and what other people are talking about, scientists and doctors, are the moves of the last couple of weeks, which you could have seen coming, but him dismissing scientists and people that understand medicine, like everybody, that seems to be far more urgent, if you're paying attention, than anything else. What's happening at HHS? It's like, we could talk about USAID being cut, deporting everybody, and obviously all these other legal decisions and the right, military in the streets. But man, like getting rid of vaccines, like I'm hearing people, and I wonder what your friend characterizes it as, talking about like a genocide, like a generation of babies could like get sick. Like the worst case scenario is
babies, because it's going to spread. I mean, it's not just, and then he's terrified. And now, of course, whereas he does a lot of work for other countries that still care about vaccines. So I live 1 mile, less than 1 mile from the CDC. And I live a half a mile from communities that surround the CDC. I was a mile from that shooter. And my really close friend was deputy director of the CDC for a while back in 2000s. CDC is gone. Pete, it's gone. And it's gone. It's so many people have quit and so many people have left that the surrounding neighborhoods are suffering economically, because a lot of people who worked for the CDC lived in the neighborhood surrounding the CDC. and it's been a massive, massive exit.
Mm.
And
well, I mean, when you say the CDC is gone, I'm not sure, exactly what that means, but it would seem that a lot of medical institutions and experts are warning in other countries, and states' health leaders, like the leaders of blue states, health department leaders, are saying ignore the CDC recommendations, ignore their guidance.
Yes, that's happening
We'll
right
come
now.
up with our own.
Right. So, Pete, here's my question
That's not
for
all
you.
they do. The CDC does a lot more than just giving guidance for vaccine schedules, et cetera.
My question to you, what I can't figure out is what is in our Robert Kennedy's brain.
Don't try. Don't try. That's a waste of
You
time.
think he's just insane? He's just an insane person?
Yeah, absolutely insane. You know what? I don't blame him. His dad was assassinated. Like, he went insane when he was born, probably being in that fucking family. A lot of those Kennedys are fucked. His dad was RFK. Whatever issues that brought up, his whole adolescence and 20s were just all kinds of fucking like, his body is broken, his brain is broken, and he's got this axe to grind.
So what's Trump's motivation for putting for what is in Trump's brain when he puts? Is Trump just destroyer of all things? Like what is
his I mean, the fact that a Kennedy would support him is a big deal.
You're right.
The fact he thought that he would get all those fucking anti-vax lunatics. I'm sure that it has to do with those two things. And finally, he's a piece of shit to women, especially. And so, I mean, I think we both can speak to this pretty articulately. Men like to be around men who are as shitty as them because it makes them feel better about the horrible things they've done, or they just don't think they're horrible. That's why they do them, maybe, but like RFK's, it's a good argument to be made that her wife killed herself because of how many affairs he had and how many terrible, how
Elon Musk, same thing.
Well, I mean, those are two. I mean, so many men that are in and around. Pete Hegseth's motherfucking hated him because of the way he treated his wives and what he did. I mean, and he's the king of the worst. So I think some of it just has to do with like birds of a feather. Shitty men that abuse women in a serial way are welcome here.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then I watched Pam Biondi, and I watched the press secretary. I don't even know her name. And
Caroline Leavitt. He's commented on both their appearances in the past few weeks alone.
They are both very scary. They almost. I mean, they're not dumb. That's the problem. I mean, neither of those two people, they're both smart and they're fast and they think quickly and they can think on their feet and all that stuff. But what's in their brains and hearts? Like I try to understand people who don't feel the same way I do. So I've always said, I understand people who think abortion's murder. I don't agree. I think there are a lot of reasons, but I understand if you think that. I get it. I've reached out to try to figure that out. Same thing with affirmative action, Pete. I really tried to listen. I once debated this guy who's famous for writing about how affirmative action hurts minorities. That's not his true motivation, but he's famous for that. Scalia cited him in an oral argument. I reached out to him. We debated. I wanted to understand what he was saying. What's in his head? What's in his heart? Trump's just a psychopath. So I don't. But the other people, I don't think Pam Biondi is a sociopath. I don't think she's a psychopath. What is in her brain and heart? I can't figure it out.
Well, I mean, power.
Ambition, yeah.
Power and ambition, but also just like, I think there's got to be, and we should be done psychoanalyzing now, but it's interesting. But I think there's got to be a strain of being attracted to a tyrant. And again, what I said earlier, like this idea of like what he's doing, we like what he's doing and the way he's doing it, and we are going to support it. What's somewhat and most contradictory, of course, but we're I guess seeing the truth is, Biondi or anybody else that you would mention, they know about that he's in the Epstein files and they don't care. So this whole pedophile thing that they were so concerned, and Republicans are concerned about children's welfare and sexual abuse and trafficking of children. He was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein.
I know,
clearly in the documents, and so they're not principled in any way other than whatever daddy says. And daddy's got all the power. He seems to have something magical, and I'm going to stick close to him. That's the only way I can make sense of it.
It's also, I just had this, I've never had this thought before. I just had an original thought in my brain about this. I haven't had.
What's that like?
Donald Trump. This next sentence is so Shakespeareanly tragic. I don't know what to make of it. He was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein, one of the worst villains ever in America, other than serial killers, and maybe worse than serial killers. I don't even know. And Roy Cohn. Like, if you ask who's the two worst Americans of the last 50 years, like not in politics, not serial, you would go Roy Cohn, Jeffrey Epstein. And Trump was best friends with both of them. It's an amazing thing. And now, and somehow he's president. Like, by the time Roy Cohn died, he was universally despised by everybody. Everybody. Anybody knows anything about McCarthyism knows. Like, Roy Cohn was just the worst human. There's it's a play about how terrible he is. I mean, it's, and Trump was his best, and they were like best friends until he got AIDS, and then Trump dumped him. So these two people, these two bookends of Trump's life, Roy Cohn was his mentor.
Yeah.
And Jeff Epstein was his best friend.
Well, most importantly, his dad was a horrible man.
Yeah. But even his dad, compared to Roy Cohn, I mean, people don't understand how terrible Roy Cohn was. I mean, he was just.
Yeah, but Donald Trump is way worse than Roy Cohn ever was.
Well, I guess so, but that's because Roy Cohn couldn't be president. I mean, if Roy Cohn was president, he'd be this bad.
Yeah. Let me ask you a couple other quick ones. I know you have thoughts on the flag burning situation. Trump said he's going to make it illegal. Guy goes right out and burns a flag, and I feel like there's a news update about his legal. But what is the law in theory behind flag burning?
So that actually raises some interesting questions, Pete. In 1968 or 7 or 9, don't hold me to it, but I think it was 68, the Supreme Court held that burning a draft card was not protected speech under the First Amendment, even when done for symbolic reasons, because the government needed the draft. And the idea was if everybody burns their draft cards, then we couldn't have a draft. Most scholars don't like that opinion. And then, in a case called Texas versus Johnson, written by Justice Scalia, the court holds that flag burning is constitutionally protected, meaning you can put someone in jail for burning the American flag if it's to, if it causes a riot, if it's to make the fire spread to a grocery store, but for just burning the flag safely as a matter of political protest, that was protected by the First Amendment.
1989, the Supreme Court.
Texas versus Johnson. And then Scalia, I have to make a point about this because it's beyond human nature for me not to. Scalia went the rest of his life doing this. Look at me, Pete. Doing this. See, if I were king, I would make flag burning illegal, but I'm a judge, so I do what the law says. None of that's true. If Justice Scalia were king, he would not have made flag burning illegal because Justice Scalia was consistently on the side of free speech. It's one of the things he was good about. And if he was king, there'd be free speech. So he just used that to deflate critics. But what people don't know about Texas versus Johnson is that it was a 5-4 decision. Not 9-0. There were 4 Supreme Court justices who went the other way, one of whom was John Paul Stevens, a famously moderate to liberal Supreme Court justice. This whole flag burning thing is such a ridiculous controversy. And the West Wing said it better than I can say it. They had this whole episode or 2 episodes on this on the West Wing. And at one point, Martin Sheen, playing President Bartlett, turns to his cabinet or his advisors and says, "Is there an epidemic of flag burning that I don't know about?" Because the Republican Party used to be all, I don't care, to be honest. I don't care. I think if you want to burn an American flag in protest, you should be allowed to do it. I think it's disrespectful to veterans, probably, to do it in some way. Veterans get very upset about this.
Well, it's often veterans that do it too, and sometimes. It seems to me like
I don't care.
I know a lot of veterans who are completely fine with it because they'll say, I fought for your right to be able to do that so that we wouldn't have a leader that would tell you you couldn't express yourself however you wanted. As long as you're not hurting anybody and wrapping Segall in the flag and lighting it, then what do I care if you burn the flag?
Democrats in both houses of Congress voted to make flag burning a federal crime. It was first a state thing in Texas versus Johnson. And then when the Supreme Court made its decision, Congress did pass a law criminalizing flag burning. So many Democrats voted for that law, and the Supreme Court then overturned that law. I think flag burning should be constitutionally protected. I think it is issue 196 on the scale.
I mean, that's not even hard. I don't even understand the controversy. Who cares?
That's what I'm saying.
Like, you're feeling to hurt because they burn a flag? Like,
well, on the other hand, People were burning draft cards in protest, and that they were allowed to go to jail for that.
Well, it's a little bit different. It's a card that's giving you an order. I mean, we could talk about the draft. I mean, I applaud anybody who doesn't.
The people burning it, though, I think weren't eligible. I think they were. I think that what if you have a draft? What if you're not back in the old days in the Vietnam War? College students would sit around, for those young people not knowing this, and the draft would come up every year, and you had a number, and if your number came up, you went, and if your number didn't come up, you didn't go. And if you were in your senior, and at a certain age, it gets cut off. Even burning a draft card that was not part of the draft system was held to be not protected, I think. So, I mean, but my big point about the flag is this. There are many ways to protest America. I can think of many ways to do it that are more effective than burning the American flag. But if you want to burn an American flag, burn an American flag. I'm just saying, I think there are more effective ways to protest. That's right.
Yeah. I'm not trying to piss you off with my protest. If it's something that,
that does piss people off.
I agree with you. There's a lot more clever and effective ways to do it. All right. This is how good you are and how good we are. The two things I wanted to talk about, we didn't even get to. Okay. You're about to post a piece about the Roberts Court and some of the best of, and by that I mean worst of, right? But so we'll talk. Maybe once you post, let's just do it next week again. But I do want to ask you this one question I told you I wanted to ask you, which is, how do you describe, what words you use to describe the moment that we're in vis-a-vis the I don't know, health of our democracy? Is that phrase even worth the status of our democracy?
I have vague. I was 11 years old in 1969, so I was aware. I was more interested in Star Trek and things, but I was aware. And cities were burning. Martin Luther King was assassinated. RFK was assassinated. Malcolm X had been assassinated years earlier. I saw Vietnam War on TV. I saw our troops being killed in Vietnam on TV, which is what eventually ended the war. Peter, it was even as 11, 12, 13-year-old in that time. Kent State happened in 1971. I was 13 years old. The Kent State thing I really remember, like college students killed,
Yeah.
And it felt, even to a teenager, it felt really bad. But I was a teenager. So recently, I asked my friend Emmett Bondurant, who was a person who argued in the Supreme Court of the United States in 1963 in favor of voting rights. He was Common Cause's general counsel for many, many years, and he argued the Rucho case in 2019, the partisan redistricting case. I also helped him challenge the filibuster on behalf of John Lewis. Emmett is a great man, an American hero. He's the person who's argued two cases in the Supreme Court, the farthest apart of any person in history, 1963 and 2019, both voting rights cases. He won one and then he lost the Rucho case. He tried to end partisan redistricting, and he worked as hard on that as anyone in America, except for the other litigator who works really hard, whose name I'm forgetting. Emmett was an adult in 1969 and a liberal in the South. And so I asked him recently, I was a teenager. You were a fully formed, adult. Is this worse than 1969? Is this worse than 68? Cities burning, students protesting, Americans dying in Vietnam, Nixon. I mean, Nixon was Nixon is president. How does this feel to you compared to that? Because that's the lowest point of my lifetime, certainly for America until now. But, and his answer was interesting. His answer was, despite the Vietnam War, which all young people hated, but I don't think ever more than 50% of America hated, according to the polls. Despite the Vietnam War and despite the civil rights issues and all that, there was a sense that government could solve problems. There was a sense.
Yeah.
Even Nixon began the EPA. Nixon began affirmative action. I mean, there was a sense, even among people hated Nixon, but there was a sense that government wasn't the enemy. And today he thinks, if you're not MAGA, you view it very, very differently, and that makes this worse. And I think that's my answer. I think this feels like the low point. Reagan started it. He was really the first president to say, don't trust the government. But Trump has taken that to a level, and the irony of that's what you've been saying this entire podcast, Pete, is this tyrant is saying, don't listen to the government, just listen to me.
I think that's a dead-on analysis your friend had. I agree with it. The degradation of the respect for government certainly didn't begin under Reagan. Every country has it, and rightfully so. But he's like, it's the problem, not the solution, right? The famous quote. And then Rush Limbaugh, who you have spoken about at length. But my theory is more, I sometimes get a little bit not frustrated, but my dad brought up the Kent State shooting. He and I were talking the other day as a result of military everywhere on the streets and so on. Of course, that was 1970, Kent State massacre. Members of the Ohio National Guard firing on unarmed protesters protesting against Vietnam War. But I feel like historical comparisons are just, they're not lost. They're super important. But in a world where today, if that happened on a college campus, back then you had a few truths, one fairly accurate reality that people lived in. Now, if it happened, a portion of the population would believe they were crisis actors. Another portion would think it's AI, it didn't happen. But a lot of people, certainly on the right, would be totally fine with unarmed protesters being killed. They'd be fine with it. And back then, I think most of the country was horrified by it. And not because of the issue they were protesting, but because they were unarmed college students. And today, if it happened, it's such a different country. And part of it is all these different realities. And part of it is like, I don't know, kids are getting shot in their schools. And the conservatives, at least, aren't doing anything about the guns. So they would be.
Right. When you say it, I tell you what came to my mind. I think that's spot on, Pete.
And people should have listened to Dear Leader. They should have, if the police shoot you or law enforcement shoots you, it's because you were doing something wrong, which is also why they don't mind them coming in to the neighborhoods, because they're like, we don't commit crimes. Like, yeah, we wait and see about that.
What I think is an under-talked, I'm not sure it's under-talked about, but it's the difference between ABC, NBC, and CBS. The only place where people got their news in 1971, 70. It was all center. It was center left, a little center right.
Or just add to your theory, print media. Every city had a newspaper, and they had journalists with editors. They couldn't print falsehoods.
Right. And I do think that if America goes away, which it might, I think Fox News played a major role in that.
Oh, yeah. Well, all of them. The right-wing media, that's my whole theory, hook, line, and sinker. What they're able to do.
CNN started off with good intentions. I mean, yes, it was center-left. CNN was always center-left.
And still practices a lot of journalism in a lot of ways, in that they don't. Sometimes even the journalists go off a little half-cocked and they say something that's not quite right or biased. But generally speaking, they still have journalists doing beat reporting, and even Fox News has some journalists doing that. But they have a standard. They have standards and practices at CNN and almost every major media outlet. But none of those media outlets matter as long as I have this microphone and access to YouTube.
Yeah, I think the crazies can be heard. Well, I think Fox News made facts irrelevant.
Well, I think Rush did first. Then I think what's his name saw what Rush was doing, and other talk radio. What's the guy's name who started everything at Fox News? Roger Ailes. And a lot of people give blame to Rupert Murdoch, but he just let Roger Ailes be the genius behind it, of course. And Ailes, for sure. But I just feel like sometimes we give too much credit to Fox News and not enough credit to the radio guys that I kind of paid a lot of attention to and questioned all the time.
My answer to your question is, when I'm asked by the media today, and this has happened 3 or 4 times in the last month, for an opinion on this or an opinion on that, I say to the journalist who's talking to me, I'm not going to be able to say anything happy. So if you don't, and I've been surprised.
What'd you say? Happy?
I'm very pessimistic. I don't see any. I'm having a hard time. I'm repressing everything because I don't want to feel this way. And I've been surprised, Pete, that major outlets have been publishing. Like I said, the LA Times. Sound just went bad.
Nope, you're good.
I said to the LA Times, even if the Roberts Court rules against Trump on a big immigrant case, I don't think he'll comply. And they printed that, which kind of surprised me. So I think my sense of pessimism, I'm usually Dr. Doom and Gloom, but in this moment, I think I'm the same as everybody else. I don't see a happy ending.
Eric Segall, everybody. I'm going to let you go. I got to run. I appreciate this hour of your time. I always learn a lot. I love you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for watching live. I really appreciate it. Patreon.com/PeteDominic if you want to make me one of these rich influencers. All right. I'll talk to you later, everybody. I'm hitting end.